for joining us for today's presentation. My name is Alex Ty, and I am the Technical Coordinator for Faster Community of Practice here at NIDRD. Today we have a presentation, very informative presentation by Dr. Robert Bohn. He is the NIST Cloud Computing Program Manager at the Advanced Networking Technologies Division. And he'll be sharing with you guys all the latest developments he has regarding high-quality metric-based service level agreements for cloud computing. Just a courtesy reminder, just to make sure that our meeting runs as smoothly and as efficiently as possible, let's hold off all questions towards the end of Dr. Bohn's presentation. I'll turn it over to Dr. Bohn to deliver his opening remarks.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alex. And I'd like to, am I live or are they just seeing the screen? Oh, they're just seeing the screen. Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Alex, and thank you everyone who took the time to dial into this presentation. What I'd like to go over a bit with you today is the development of high-quality metrics-based service-level agreements for cloud computing. In this talk, I'm going to give you a little rundown of the history of the program, the drivers and the motivators for developing service-level agreements, why we work in the standards arena, and then how we can then leverage work in standards and service-level agreements for usage in the United States government. Okay, so I'd like to describe a vision of the path forward. What does everybody want to do with cloud, right? So the given thing is a cloud contract is actually created to address a unique business need. You can't go up to your supervisor and say, I want to do something in the cloud. You need to have a business case to do this. You have to be able to defend a proposal. And the goal then, not only after you decide you move into the cloud, but then you need to reduce the time and effort needed to create high-quality, reliable service-level agreements. You'll see that part of the work on service-level agreements has to do with their complexity, and now we're trying to work at demystifying that. So let me zip you back a few years, back to 2013, 2014 timeframe, in which our program developed a U.S. technology roadmap for cloud computing. We had several public working groups. These public working groups were, the participants were all over the spectrum. They were from government, they were from academia, they were from industry. Some of these mailing lists had 300 to 500 people on each of them. So the key thing to realize is that this was not done in a vacuum. We did have great participation, and the reason that NIST can push its push having great participation is because it has a unique role and reputation as being as a neutral broker. So in this slide then shows the U.S. government cloud computing technology roadmap. So it's a 2-volume set. Volume 1 on the left is really a shortened version. This version has really got all the meat in it. This would be useful for CIOs, other types of IT program managers, and other middle line managers to understand cloud computing and the challenges that we face. The second volume is more for your teams who are going to be looking at it more in depth. People who are going to be more involved in the actual day-to-day operations and sort of try to get an understanding. Again, the interesting thing about this, because of the collaborative effort here, we realized very quickly that it wasn't just the government that was having issues with cloud computing. It was everybody was having issues, and they were all having the same issues. So in that first volume, what you'll find is a set of 10 requirements for cloud computing. You could think of this as 10 sets of risks, right? right? If we need to go to full cloud, we have to address each one of these requirements. And if we can't address the requirements, then we're probably not going to get there. So I'd like to point out a few of them. I'd like to point out a few of them right now. So number one is work on international voluntary consensus-based standards. So NIST is expert at working in the international community on standards. We also have requirement 3, which will be a lot of the subject of this talk, the technical specifications to enable development of consistent high-quality service level agreements. At the time, the service level agreements were not of high quality and were unique from provider to provider. Finally, I'd like to point your attention to requirement number 10, which is defined and implemented cloud service metrics. So with a push on each one of these requirements, we are able to come up with something a little bigger than just working on each one of them individually. So now I will discuss about service level agreements. So what are they in the first place? Well, a service level agreement is only part of a cloud computing agreement, right? So you have, when you sign a contract with a cloud provider, you're really signing a master service agreement or an MSA. But the SLA will tell you how much of whatever characteristic you're getting. So it will define the service and the service levels being provided, whether you break a threshold on the max or on the min, or you need to keep some service level measurements within a certain range. It sets the performance characteristics for the service. Again, it identifies the metrics that we're going to be discussing, and as importantly, the measurement technique that's going to be used. Finally, it identifies guarantees and methods of redress. Mind you, there is no standard naming convention or structure for an SLA, but really these SLAs help manage expectations of customers and cloud service providers. So the challenges. So we identified challenges in our roadmap, but I'll address some of them here. There are no current SLA standards at the time that this, at the beginning, so there was no uniformity at all. People and providers were using different terminologies and definitions. Right there is a stumbling block. So if I want to say availability and the two providers that I'm discussing availability with have two different definitions, right from the very beginning, we're mismatched. So if I'm going to have some method for making an apples-to-apples comparison of the word availability, along with all the other terms and vocabulary in cloud computing contracts. Finally, everyone is using different metrics, and I can't really compare them. So one could think that it's almost like the wild, wild west of metrics. Everybody is using their own unique set, and again, hard to compare them. So the wide diversity in SLA makes these understanding and composing them a very time-consuming activity, where if they were more uniform and written from case to case and be able to compare, you could save significant time and energy. They also contribute to the misconceptions of both the consumer and provider. If you don't have this basic vocabulary and some understanding of what you're going to get, what you need, how your requirements are going to be addressed in your service level agreement, you're starting off on a weak foot. And finally, comparing cloud services with different underlying SLAs is also very difficult. So in late 2013, a vote was held at the ISOJTC 1 meeting to propose a standard for service level agreements. Fortunately, this vote passed with an 18-0 unanimous vote. Everyone in the room identified and recognized the importance of having standardization in service level agreements for cloud computing to help move the marketplace and to build confidence in for consumers. The standard itself is quite complex and a very and a nice list here. It was broken into 4 sections. The first section is on the overview and concepts, and that was actually published in September 2016. The 19086 is on the metrics, and that's at the draft international standards stage. The service level agreement part 3 core conformance requirements is also moving into the DIS stage. Finally, the last part is on SLA and IT security, security and privacy. This is being handled by a separate subcommittee, Subcommittee 27, which deals with security. So they're working in partnership with SC38 to complete this part of the document. Next slide, please. Okay. Oh, yeah, I see. Okay, great. All right. So thank you. I'd like to introduce some fundamental concepts and vocabulary now for the audience. I said before, cloud service agreement. So this is the documented agreement the cloud service provider and customer governance services, also known as the master service agreement. Cloud service level agreement, I described that a little bit, and it's just part of the cloud service agreement. 2 new terms, cloud service level objectives, SLO. It's a commitment the cloud service provider makes for a specific quantitative characteristic of a cloud service where the values follow the interval scale or ratio scale. In other words, these will be numerical in nature. They will either represent a range of values or a maximum value or a minimum value before a trigger is goes off. Finally, we have cloud service qualitative objectives, or SQOs. These are commitments the provider makes for a specific qualitative characteristic, and the values follow a nominal or an ordinal scale. So I might ask you a computer security certification question. Do you have this certification to do X? And you would say, and the provider would respond, yes, I have that, and then that would just be a check. So that's a quality objective. Hard to put a real number on it. It's just sort of binary. I have it or I don't have it. And then finally, the details of these SLA, SLO, and SQOs can vary for different cloud service offerings, meaning I would think about doing SaaS differently from PaaS, differently from IaaS, but I would still have the same overall framework. Here's a slide on the role of metrics. So the definition and usage of appropriate metrics and underlying measures are essential aspects of the cloud service level agreement. This is where the rubber really meets the road. The metrics are used to set the boundaries and the margins of error and limitations on the overall service level. How can we use these metrics? Well, here's a list with 6 bullets in it. I'd like to go to bullet number 4 that says link properties, measurements, and metrics. So if the metrics are composed properly, they can be composed with other metrics to develop unique metrics for particular situations. So they have this composability property. So back to the vision that I started out with. I want to propose here that our vision and the goal of reducing the time and effort needed to create high-quality, reliable service level agreements is by the road of standards, right? So here now I want to start discussing how the work that we did in the 19086 standard is going to be leveraged for use in the federal government. So if we just looked at the service level agreement at the, from the standard, we see that it's really composed of 4 sections: covered services, the definitions, service monitoring, and then the roles of responsibilities. For the remainder of this talk, I'm going to focus on the top left, covered services. So in the standard, the standard produces a set of 12 possible service level content areas. And here they are here. You can see the top 4 in orange really have to do a lot with the service itself. The unique green one in the top right is on data management and how one is going to handle data and the life cycle of the data. The next line is really more about the management and government of the service and how you will work with the service provider. And of course, the last 2 at the bottom are on information security and PII protection, how this was all broken down. So what I'd like to do then is just take a look at performance. So what does performance actually look like in this model? So here I will examine the performance content area. And so the top 3 components are of performance from the standard are the cloud service response time, the cloud service capacity, and the elasticity components. You can see each one of these then are further broken down into sets of SLOs, things that we could put a number on. So let's just look at the cloud service capacity component in the middle there. So what are 4 of them are the limit of simultaneous cloud service connections, the limit of available cloud service resources, the cloud service throughput, bandwidth. These are things that you could discuss with your cloud service provider. You would like to have numbers associated with this. You would also like to ensure that any requirements that you develop you can pull down into performance characteristics, availability characteristics, and then develop metrics off of them. So I'm going to go to the next one, which has a little bit different flavor, service reliability. So on the previous slide, what we just had examples that had service level objectives, actual numerical numbers associated with them. Here, we also show examples where we have service quality objectives. Let's look at the middle one. It has 9 service objectives, 4 service level objectives in purple, 5 are service quality objectives in blue. So for example, the first one I see there is the backup method, backup verification. These are things that you would have to have your service provider tell you what they are. So I don't really put a number on there, but I check the box to make sure that you have a method for backup. You have a backup verification method. I have to see what it is, and then if it's not adequate for my requirement, we can start to discuss this. But at least now we have something to discuss instead of just, you know, now we have a better picture of what we're looking at. Well, okay. So again, in the standard, I just wanted to go through a bit of statistics from the standard. What we have on the left-hand side were all those content areas, and this chart then shows the number of service quality objectives in blue and the number of service level objectives in gray. let me just draw your attention to data management again. There are 16 possible service quality objectives regarding data management in this standard, which means these are things that are like the life cycle of the data, how the data is going to be handled, when you get it, is it going to be encrypted, how am I going to be able to get it back. These are a whole list of things that you have to consider when you're talking about your data. And it's going to be difficult in this model to put numbers on these, right? Because these are service quality objectives, but they're not intended to have numerical with them. We can go and look at performance, which is an opposite case, right? We see that we have 9 service level objectives. So now I have 9 types of metrics that need some type of measurement associated with them. So you can see there's a lot of stuff to start with, right? But we have to still push the ball a little further downfield. So possible construction of SLA with 19086 in one slide is, so you build it upon the selected SLA content areas. Each content area is formed from a set of SLO SQOs. The SLO SQOs have associated metrics. The metrics can be described using NIST Cloud Metric Model and the 19086-2. And as important, new cloud metrics can be constructed with this model. So the ones that we have may not be adequate for you, but we can help you develop this with this model. Oh, okay, so here's a slide that shows, assuming, okay, the black is the performance service content areas, and what we've shown that it has 3 SLOs associated with it, where it's L1, L2, L3. So this is our base model that let's say we've all agreed upon a base model. And Roy comes into Tom and says, Tom, I know you're working on this contract for cloud, but I've got 2 extra requirements I need. What can you do with them? So Roy agency brings in a 4th service level objective and a quality objective. Now, for his particular case, well, luckily, Tom has been following the model, so he knows what his metrics are going to look like and what he expects. He can put this out. He can put this out on the street along with the metric descriptions for L4 and Q1. Now he can get responses back from cloud provider B, who already accepts the black stuff, but now he can start addressing Tom's specific case, L4 and Q1. Cloud provider C comes in and says, I can address that, and I can give you another one, quality 2. But now we have something that we can start to compare, right? We're getting to that apples to apples comparison. Now you can start to have discussions with different cloud providers regarding these things with the same set of questions, basically. So the current state that we are is, well, we're reviewing and developing additional content areas at work at NIST. We're developing additional SLO SQOs and the metrics. What is really needed for this vision is to develop a set of common vocabulary, a modular set of components. So if I was interested in performance, I could just plug and play into a service level agreement. We'd like to have a catalog of ready-to-use metrics. So you could go to a website or a database that we're trying to stand up and grab the metrics that you would need for your own case, or learn how to develop your own in-house metrics. We plan on putting guidance documents out on how to use all this material together. And finally, we'd like to include some real-world examples, because this is a very good framework, but it's nothing like seeing what happens when you get real-world examples and real data associated with that. So how do you come in? Well, so we would like to work with you to help us validate some of these content areas. You saw a list of 12 up there. You might have some of your own particular content areas that you have an interest in that we did not pick up. So that is more input for us. We can also look for additional metrics based on your requirements. So the NIST team is willing to work back and forth. And then finally, we could probably develop boilerplate language with you to help build this these guidance documents. Lastly, I'd like to just throw a word in for accessibility as well. So in the government, we have Section 508 that we have to maintain and be aware of. In the 19086 standard at the top, it has two accessibility components, standards and policies, right? So those are service quality objectives. That would tell me what type of accessibility standards do you follow regarding the cloud service, and what type of policies do you follow. So, for example, NIST has been also doing work on cloud accessibility. They also have a taxonomy based on cloud accessibility, and we could see some of these themes: audio and alternatives, speaking and communicating, visual and alternatives. Now, I propose with the cloud accessibility team that there might be an opportunity for us to also develop actual service quality objectives. When I'm talking about visual and alternatives, what is the screen resolution? How big can I magnify? What is the zoom settings that I could put in? What would you offer me? But now, these are just the beginnings of conversations that we really had a hard time even starting before. But this is how the standard can then be leveraged into the government. So one thing that we are planning to do is to hold a series of workshops to educate and socialize these ideas with you. Here is just a generic agenda, what we might think of doing. So another discussion on the status, where we are, some additional education on SLA metrics and the standard, and finally 2 hours of exercises where we could bring in scenarios or stories from other government agencies and go through it and then start to see where are the content areas, and then at the end compile a list of SLO, SQOs, and metrics that we could use for that overall database. And then finally discuss what does this all mean in the big context and stuff. So that's my contact slide. My name is Robert Bohn. I serve as the program manager. The lion's share of this work is done by Eric Simon, who serves as the editor for the cloud standards, the 19086 and the 19086-2, teamed up with John Messina and Annie Sokol. So I want to thank you for your attention. I might have spoken a little fast for your audience. I see we have plenty of time for questions. But again, thank you. That's all.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Bohn. Anyone in the room? Questions? How about on the bridge?
I'd like to mention that we're currently working with a couple of agencies now, mainly GSA. They've taken an interest in this, so we have meetings with them scheduled. And then we also work with our own NIST CIO team, cloud group. Okay.
If there are no questions, go ahead and...
So let me ask a question.
Sure.
So this take into account the system security plan standardization that NIST has developed over time?
You know, not at this point. This is that's really a FedRAMP type of, you know, umbrella. But certainly, I believe that with the production of the -4 of this standard, there will be some additional input for people in computer security to start to tie their heads around a little bit more concrete issues. So I don't think this obviates FedRAMP by any stretch of the imagination. However, it could give people inside the offices or in the security programs something that they could start to put metrics on or start to understand in a different light. Now, I know, like with FISMA and FedRAMP, it's all, you know, risk-based management, right? But I should still, my feeling is I should still be able to put a number somewhere, or at least a checkbox that it's set yes or no, right? So I do believe there's an opportunity for more development, but at this stage, it's in its infancy.